It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. It is Tuesday. Sorry. At this point, now that we're in the off season, now I'm going to not know what day it is. How are you feeling, Alan, on this Tuesday?
Feeling good. Talked to Mike Tomlin today. Last day at the facility for a while. Wrapping things up, man.
Putting a bow on the season. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff from the Tomlin presser.
I feel like putting a bow on this season is like sort of like when your uncle just shoves $20 in an envelope and gives it to you. Stop
at a CVS to grab a card on the way to the party.
No, not even like just pulls out the money clip, All right, one for you. Merry Christmas, happy birthday. Did I get you on your birthday? Did I get you on your birthday? How old are you again now? Yeah, there you go. That's
today's day and age. I think it's an Amazon gift card instead of the cash.
Probably. But yeah, that's it, no bows involved in the end of this season.
That's fair. We're gonna dive into a lot of that. Couple questions that I want to get to as well from a couple listeners that DM me on Twitter, which I appreciate. Then Alan, I have a take that I want to throw your direction, and also the people that watch or listen to this podcast that I'm excited to get into. I'll find a way to work it in as we kind of go through Tomlin's end of the season presser here, though. Some stuff to get to. First and foremost, let's just knock this one out of the way, because people are going to say that it's too late to talk about. This shouldn't be brought up at this point. But the very last question at the buzzer, Tim Benz asking him about George Pickens. I think it was Brian Batko was the one that originally reported. It was Mike DeFabo. Mike DeFabo was the one that put it out there. George Pickens was late to the game against Kansas City on Christmas. A lot of people were like, why is this even being put out now? There's so much time has gone past. It comes out the same day Tomlin had to speak. So I figured he was going to be asked about it. Tim Benz at the buzzer getting the question in. And then Tomlin just you rarely see Tomlin not know what to say, but he seemed like completely thrown off that he was even asked about it, and was at a loss for words, basically, for even how to answer the question.
Yeah, it didn't seem like he was ready for that one. As to why it comes out now, I don't know. Sometimes the passage of time allows people to say things that they would not have said before. Sometimes things have happened in the interim, where, people don't want things to become a distraction. They don't want things to become a thing, but then the season ends and they're like, oh yeah, I can share this with you now, because there are no consequences of it being shared now. It's not going to matter when George Pickens returns to the Steelers, if George Pickens returns to the Steelers. And so it becomes, something that somebody might be willing to let become public at that point. Does it matter? Absolutely. I mean, come on. You can't of all the things you can do as an NFL player, you can get away with as an NFL player, being so late to a game that you're after the inactives are listed when you yourself are returning from an injury is not a thing you can get away with. It's just not I think I saw a lot of responses on social media, and people oh, why is this a big deal? This is an enormous deal for a player to be that late to a game when they themselves were coming back from injured. I am astonished that Mike Tomlin let him play. If he was coming off an injury, 90 minutes to game comes and goes, and you've not laid eyes on George Pickens, I can't believe he let him dress for that game. Unbelievable to me. That is absolutely a huge deal.
Fan reaction to it, again, it's because of who it is. If this is Van Jefferson, somebody else in the receiving room, I think the reaction is what you just said there, is why is this guy playing? And they would be on the same side of that. But for whatever reason, this is the most polarizing player, in the sense that I just feel like very few people, I think that, we are one of them, when there's times to criticize and when there's time to hype up, have fairly talked about George Pickens. I see way too many people bring up things that I don't think need mentioned in the light that they do, in a negative direction. And then there's people that in their eyes, he can do no wrong as well. And I see a lot of that as well. Like what you're saying, a lot of people just, I don't know, support's not the right word for this, but sweeping it under the rug as they have basically. This is just another thing in a long line with George, though. And maybe that is why it gets brought up right now, too, once the season ends, is because, like, this is one instance of him being late to a game. It's happened with a lot of practices. It's happened with a lot of meetings in the past. Like, this was a game. This is the second time that I know it's been a game that he's shown up late to, not this season in general in his Steelers tenure. But like in terms of meetings and practices, it's happened far more than that.
Yeah, and like I said, like you can get away with some of that stuff. Like you can miss you miss a meeting, you're late for practice, like maybe you got to run some laps, maybe you get a fine of a couple $100 or $1,000. Like there are infractions like that. I don't want to say that stuff doesn't matter because I think it does point to a lack of professionalism, but like it's not impactful to the product being put out on the field during the game. If George Pickens shows up late to the game, they put him in the lineup, then he goes to try to rush through warmups. He was coming off a soft tissue injury. He goes to try to rush through warmups, gets hurt, can't play. Now the team has to play a man short against the Kansas City Chiefs. Like that's a big deal. You can't do that. Like yep. There's stuff like yelling at fans during a game, like it's a bad look, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. As long as he goes out there and like does his job on the next play and doesn't allow his emotions to take himself out of the game, which I will say I think probably has been something that George has done better at. And like Mike Tomlin said, like he took some steps. I do think that's one of those things where like we've seen some of the same kind of sideline tantrum antic things that we saw in the past, but I didn't see a lot this year where he took himself out of the game because of it. Like I didn't see that happen like we have in the past where he was kind of obviously distracted. So like some of that stuff doesn't matter. This definitely matters. This is a big deal.
The two things that I think would have gotten that looked like they got under his skin enough to take him out of the game. Luckily, I mean, they were both losses, but it happened at the end of them, right? Like the thing with Jordan Lewis at the end of the Cowboys game and then the Browns game at the end of that one. Like if those happen in the course of a game, it might have been enough to throw him off. But to your point, yeah, I think a lot of the things it's just like isolated just on their own. It's not something that I would be concerned about, but it's the pattern for me as to why, it looks like we're heading in this direction. But yeah, I think that he's really something to monitor over this offseason for me is the direction that they choose to go there because somebody asked me about it. I guess we can bring that up right here, even though this isn't related to the presser, but somebody asked me about George and we're like, what's the most likely outcome of this offseason? An extension, a trade, or if they were to not do an extension, a trade in that respect, does he then force his way out? Like the team wanting to trade him or the team having to trade him. So basically 3 different avenues there. And honestly, the one that I wrote out right away was the extension. I don't think that happens this offseason. I think if they were going to end up committing to him down the line, you got to see a full season of him being willing to put in, like, there's nothing about what this season showed me that says they can commit $130 million to this guy. So roll that one out right away. And then it becomes, okay, if they're not going that route, is he okay with playing the 4th year of his rookie contract without an extension? Or do they even want him here to begin with to even start the offseason? Have they had enough of this where they would move on without him even forcing his way out?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they did with Deontay Johnson. That was basically like, okay, we're not gonna, we're basically that was like a prophylactic trade. Like we think the contract situation is gonna cause problems, so we're just gonna trade you before we even get there. Like, could they do that again? Absolutely. I don't know if they will, nor do I know how he. Like, the other thing about like George is like I don't really know how he would react to the team telling him we're not going to extend your contract. I don't think that I don't even feel like I have a good sense of what response that would get. I don't really know. So I think it's very hard to predict. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but I mean, obviously you can't extend his contract under the circumstances. You just can't. And they've just as obviously need to find a way to improve the wide receiver room, not make it worse just by trading away their problem people again. Like, I mean, we just did this last year where like they got rid of Deontay Johnson. Were they better for that move? Probably not. Like, so like, at some point productivity has to matter. I don't know. It's a very difficult position.
Yep. I expect there to be quite a bit of turnover within that room. That's kind of something to talk about. The turnover that's going to take place within the organization in general. We mentioned yesterday because somebody asked me like a realistic amount of turnover that we could expect. What were some of the changes that we could expect, on a realistic scope? Mike Tomlin talked about like saying coaching changes were just going to take place. That's kind of the nature of the business when you have contracts that expire. Not everybody's going to be back and stuff like that. But I'm curious as to like he didn't really dive into who those were though, and I think that that's the tough part about this, like especially with coaching contracts. Like we legitimately do not even know what coaches contracts have expired at this point, right?
Other than I know that Arthur Smith's hasn't.
Yeah.
He's got a 3-year deal, so 2 left for him. I think that's the only
Mhm.
one I'm really like firmly aware of. I've heard conflicting reports about Terrell Austin about whether it's
Same.
up or it's not up. I don't really know. Usually, I'll say usually position coaches get 2-year contracts and coordinators get 3-year contracts. That's sort of the standard deal. But I've been told that's not the case for some of these guys. So, it's
Well, what year would this be of Terrell Austin? Is this the third, or
uh
was this?
this would be his 3rd year as coordinator.
Yeah.
But remember, he was already on
Mhm.
the staff, so he might have had a contract before he got promoted,
Mm,
and so I don't know.
okay. I think that's going to be interesting to watch. Is just like because I theoretically they can move off guys before their contracts expire, and absolutely that should be something that they're willing to do. But just in terms of whose contracts expire, I think that's something to watch here and how much turnover is going to take place there. Obviously, the quarterback room is going to be something of note to keep an eye on in terms of the amount of turnover. No, despite Skylar Thompson coming in, don't think that he's going to be QB1 when this team opens up. However, Alan talked about Justin Fields and was pretty complimentary when talking about Justin Fields. What's your take on that? Do you have any better feeling going in one direction about the whole Justin Fields, Russell Wilson conversation?
I think they really want to bring Justin Fields back. And I think that him being a starter is a real possibility. Um, and it's weird because like this is where like probability and things get interesting. It's like I think it's more likely than not that Russell Wilson would still be the better player in 2025. But I think Justin Fields is the only one of those two that can possibly get to where the Steelers probably need to get their quarterback play to realistically contend for something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, despite how possible it is, if you were to hit that ceiling and the low, like
right.
even though it's a
Like,
lower percentage of happening,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Like
yeah.
Russell Wilson's ceiling is just not high enough anymore.
Mhm.
And while his floor is a heck of a lot higher than Justin Fields, I don't see how you can go back to Russ at this point. I just don't. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. They need better quarterback play, not worse. He's going to be 37. It's not going to be better. Fields probably won't be better either, but at least you're giving yourself a chance. But really my big takeaway about the quarterback position is not really about Russell Wilson or about Justin Fields, is that it really feels to me like we talked yesterday about like what are the plans that make sense to bring Mike Tomlin back for, and like
Yeah.
I talked about like kind of making big splashes or tearing things down, and I've kind of come up
Mhm.
with another one here that I want to run by you because I think
Okay.
this is where they're kind of headed. Is you put together another good draft class in 2025, another class that sort of follows the pattern of 22 and I'm sorry, of 23 and 24. Focus on the trenches, maybe include defensive line this time, wide receiver, corner, those high value positions, add multiple assets at some of them. Maybe I could see them going to D tackle and wide receiver and corner twice, even in this draft class.
Yeah.
Load up again, play Justin Fields for a year, see if it happens to get better. Probably won't, but just see. And then maybe maybe go make a big trade up for a quarterback in 2026. And maybe
Yeah.
make the Patrick Mahomes move in 2026 when it looks like, I mean, look, there just are no quarterbacks worth having in the like. There's no one that the Steelers should even want at 21, and the guys that they would have to trade up to get at 1 and 2 are good. Like I don't. Somebody asked me on Twitter, is like, if Justin Fields was in this draft, would he be the top quarterback? And I'm like, I don't know, probably. Like, yeah, like it's like this is not a very good. Just a bad quarterback class in the first round. There's no one the Steelers should be taking at 21. To trade up, that have to go all the way up to like 2 to get somebody worth having, and even then, I don't even think it's really good value for number 2 for guys like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think there is no realistic upgrade at the quarterback position outside of some like weird trades that haven't really been talked about very much. I think maybe they're just kicking the can, like literally just kicking the can down the road for another year, attempt to build through the draft again, set up the foundational pieces some more, and then go make the splash at quarterback in 26. What are your thoughts about that?
Here's my thought on this. Love everything that you said, and maybe it is Justin Fields. I would operate pretty much the same way. I went the cheapest possible quarterback this season.
Okay.
To spend on everything else to set up the roster in the best possible spot for 26. So somebody asked me, who do I want to be the starting quarterback? And this is one I told you before we started.
Skylar Thompson is your answer.
Hey,
QB1
within reason.
Skylar
Within
Thompson.
reason. If that is, I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily. I'm not going to pound the table for this to happen. If he gets cut, if it's on the same situation as Russ, and it's Kirk Cousins at the vet men in the same situation as Russ, that's the cheapest route. Sign me up, because I want to build the rest of the roster for the next guy. It's not about the quarterback in 25. It's really just a placeholder for me this upcoming season.
I mean, like, how bad of a quarterback would you like? Okay, so like, what if the best, cheapest option is like?
Well, so
Tyrod
the caveat
Taylor.
there was within reason.
Yeah, like Tyrod Taylor, Jameis Winston. Like, how far down the line are you willing to go?
Man, Tyrod Taylor's old as hell too. What's he, like 36?
Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson is the one that people are saying is like, pick out one guy that maybe goes the same trajectory as like a Sam Darnold this past season. I don't see that happening, by the way, but that's the one like popular pick for the quarterbacks, like reclamation projects.
Bringing Mason Rudolph back.
Hey, I mean, I know some of our subscribers would certainly be happy about it. I know some Twitter users would be happy about it. If it's basically the minimum, and the rest of if having Mason Rudolph as the quarterback allows you to get T. Higgins, yes.
Okay.
I will take that trade-off. That's where I'm at with the roster. Like,
I've pushed this strategy before, that someone should just moneyball the quarterback position. I do think it's a good idea. I'm not sure I would want to be a fan of a team trying it for the first time. It might not go all that well, but I'm interested in I'm academically interested. Let me just say that. Like, I'm interested to see what happens if you just decide we're not going to spend any money on quarterbacks. All the rest of the money goes into the roster. What does that end result look like? I'm genuinely
here's the thing is like
how that goes.
I'm marrying the idea that you brought up with that being, so this is only like a 1-year thing I'm not trying to do this every single year. I'm just trying to get to 26 to then be aggressive to get the quarterback. So that, like, it's not like I'm trying to do this on a year-to-year, but then obviously you'd have a guy in a rookie contract, which is still obviously value within that too. So I guess you're still not paying a bunch for the quarterback position there. But yeah,
you could just do a Brock Purdy thing and like draft a third-day pick and start him and see what happens.
Is it going to turn out as well as that has in San Francisco? I don't know. Here's another thing.
I'm not even gonna hedge. No, it is not.
Here's the thing too that I want to, another take that I have, because that system is so well set up, obviously, or has been prior to the season. Obviously, a bunch of injuries took place there. A take that I kind of have regarding the Steelers in general, the 2024 team at the very least, is I think if isolated, like there's components within there this could have worked in different systems and different situations, right? Like I think if you look at Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator, he could work as an offensive coordinator. We've seen it happen before. Did it go so well this year? No. Didn't have the quarterback play, doesn't have the weapons at his disposal. Obviously, the offensive line issues as well. Could Russell Wilson still be a serviceable quarterback in the NFL if he had the right weapons, or like an elite offensive coordinator, or like one that paired better with him? I think you could get serviceable level play out of him. Could the lack of weapons, despite that being the case, work for an NFL offense if you have an elite quarterback or an elite offensive coordinator? Yes. Could you get by with the Steelers offensive line?
Any worse than the Chiefs are.
If you had, Yeah. So like with the offensive line that they have, could you get by with that type of offensive line if the other pieces were as good or better above level for an NFL offense? And I think yes. So I think like a lot of different pieces, if isolated about the Steelers offense, could have worked, but obviously you couldn't have all of them together in unison and have it work. So like that's to me kind of where the Steelers fell short in 2024. But now, bigger picture, I'm starting to wonder if also I'm starting to feel that way about Mike Tomlin at the helm of the entire thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's
because I think Mike Tomlin is a awesome football coach, but I'm wondering if where the rest of the roster is, where I expect it to go, just kind of where they're at in terms of the roster construction, if he's still the guy that should be in charge here. And let me bring up something to you and tie in a question here before we go further that I got from a DM. What are your thoughts on this? We talked about Tomlin being a leader of men. Isn't Dan Campbell kind of that same breath? However, he turns his game plans over to his OC in DC, and now they are both top head coaching candidates. I think Campbell is kind of what we wish Mike Tomlin would be. He also far more aggressive in that respect as well, just like we would hope Tomlin would be. I guess what I'm asking is Dan Campbell the best possible version of Mike Tomlin?
I feel like Dan Campbell and Mike Tomlin are fairly different people. I feel like Dan Campbell's like the best possible version of Bill Cowher, right? Like that, that's the better comparison for me.
Okay.
I think Mike Tomlin and Dan Campbell are very different. Are very different people. I think Mike Tomlin is like in some ways like much less aggressive, much less of a raw guy. He's a psychological motivator. He is not a flying spittle shouter, you know. And so I think they're very different people. What does like the best version of Mike Tomlin look like?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like Tony Dungy, probably. Like I think they've had fairly like similar career, numbers. Like I think they're pretty close. Like I don't know. I think Mike Tomlin's pretty unique in what makes him a good coach. I think there's definitely something to be said for just the conservativeness of it all feels bad. It just does not feel like it works. It's not helpful. For a guy who talks a lot about not living in his fears, the Steelers basically built their entire operation under like risk reduction. Like it's different words, but it's the same concept. And I don't think that part they're having a lot of success with. I want to ask you about this. So I kind of broke down this idea of you go into 2026, you're trading up for a quarterback. Okay, let's say as a fan, you buy into this idea. Okay, they're like, hey, look, they got to make a big move for a quarterback. There just isn't one there this year. Next year's the year. You give Justin his shot. You see how it goes, and then you make the splash move. If you buy into that plan and say, okay, this is what the team should be doing, do you have faith in Mike Tomlin and a Mike Tomlin-led staff successfully turning a trade up for a quarterback move into an elite franchise quarterback?
That's tough because on one hand, I almost want to give him the benefit of the doubt because it seems like the timeline has kind of just always been off with when they're looking for a quarterback. Like this year's quarterback class, we've talked about it not being very good in the first round. Could certainly have said the same thing in 2022 when they drafted Kenny Pickett. That class was not very good when they needed a quarterback. At the same time, the like in-season evaluation of the talent that they have at the quarterback position, I also think has been off. Now, I'm not saying Mason Rudolph is a world beater, but should have turned the keys over to him well before they did with what they were getting from Mitch Trubisky. And who knows how the season could have gone at that point. I don't necessarily think there's enough evidence one way or another to let me know. Like Mike Tomlin aside, I look at the people in the organization and I have pause about not only finding the right guy, but then also developing him.
Here's the thing. You're dead right about the no evidence. Who on this team has done it? And the answer is really nobody.
Yeah.
And as long as that's the case, I think I'm going to be pretty skeptical. I think if they go down this plan, they've got to find an answer to that question along the way. They've got to find something along the way that gives you a reason to say yes to that question before we get there with Mike Tomlin calling somebody on draft night with the Steelers trading up to pick number 7 to get Drew Aller or whatever. Like you got to have that in place before you get there, or I'm very concerned about the way this goes down.
I don't know that I would be waiting until right before the 20. Like I almost feel like that guy should be brought in this offseason.
March 25th of 2026 either. Like,
yeah. So like I almost feel like I don't know who's out. Like being put on the spot right now, I can't give you a name of somebody that I feel like should be brought
won't
in.
have a name for a bit, but yeah.
You know what? Wait. What about one of the 2 guys that were part of the Patriots head coaching search, if you want to call it that? They were brought in to accommodate the Rooney Rule, obviously. Pep Hamilton worked with quarterbacks, obviously a ton. Could he make sense with that?
Andrew Luck and Indianapolis. Yeah. It was out of the league last year, right? Like, I mean, the guy who's probably going to be pretty thirsty for some work. Yeah, sign me up all the way, 100%.
And the other name that was in that obviously was Byron Leftwich, obviously a former quarterback himself. Don't know what his track record is in terms of working with quarterbacks. Obviously was an OC, but like,
I mean,
with
Jameis Winston threw 1 billion interceptions and then he got Tom Brady. So like, I just, you know, hard to really judge a guy on that. But
I like Pep. Yeah, sign me up for Pep. I've been honestly going back to when the team hired Matt Canada as offensive coordinator. Pep Hamilton was the guy that I was talking about for that position. I've been trying to find a spot for him on this staff for a while. I certainly think it makes sense. Now, what do you consider that role though for me? Because it's like, you got Tom Arth already as the quarterback's coach. Like,
yeah, you call him like pass game coordinator. You call him like assistant head coach, whatever. Find a way. Senior offensive assistant.
Yep. I mean, we've been talking about ways to expand the staff. That to me is definitely one to start on the offensive side. We've talked about looking for somebody from the front 7 part of the defensive side. I want to kind of turn back here. We were just talking about the idea of trading up for a quarterback in 2026, getting aggressive. I guess a question, Mike Tomlin's addressed this as well today, was do they have to be bad to land the next franchise quarterback? I mean, you talked about the trade up for Patrick Mahomes, the trade up for Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson taken at the end of the first round. Jalen Hurts was a 2nd round pick. There's obviously like Jared Goff was a 1st round pick. Now he's not on the same team that took him number 1 overall. There's obviously some high picks that are within this group still playing as well. CJ Stroud, number 2. But I think that's an interesting question. I think as long as you're willing to get aggressive to move up, maybe not, but obviously you don't have to use the draft capital, a bunch of draft capital to move up if you're picking high. So like, where do you stand on that as well? Because I think it's an interesting debate.
I think the idea of tanking in the NFL, if you already have an above average team, is absolutely stupid. Now, if you're in the sort of like, if the best you can do is like 6 or 7 wins, then yeah, sure, maybe you should just go head for the bottom. But I don't think there's ever a good idea for a team that is currently in the playoffs to go shooting for the bottom. I think I think when fans bring it up, they have no idea what it is like to go through seasons like that. Especially Steelers fans. You know who doesn't ask for this, by the way, is fans of teams that have done it recently. None of them are asking for the team to tank. It's only people that are so far removed from it. In fact, lots of Steelers fans weren't even alive the last time the Steelers were that bad. The only people that think this is a good idea are people that have never seen it happen. Because not only is it miserable to go through, it doesn't work most of the time. It's just a bad idea. And I asked Mike Tomlin that question, not because I believe the Steelers should tank, because lots of people do, and I wanted his response to that. And he didn't really give a good one, but that's fine. But this idea that you should just go for the bottom to go get a high draft pick, it's a really, really bad idea. Like it almost never works in the NFL when you're talking about a team that is already good. To try that, it's not necessary either. You can get good quarterbacks in the late first round. You get good quarterbacks in the second round, and you can trade up. Like you mentioned, a lot of these guys have been trade ups. Like it's not that hard, and you don't have to trade up to 2 all the time either. Like the Steelers are the Steelers already in this. And what 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, traded up to get Devin Bush. Like they can trade up to get a quarterback if they can trade up to get Devin Bush. Like it's not that it's not any harder. I mean, Devin Bush was picked at 10 overall. There's been plenty of years where you get a good quarterback at 10 overall.
Yep, absolutely. What I do think is interesting, 2 years in a row now, I want to get your thought on this. We've seen the number 2 overall pick turn that team around immediately. Obviously, not just them, but been a massive part of it. CJ Stroud last year in Houston, Jaden Daniels this year in Washington, and win a playoff game in their rookie year as well, to the point where they're now in the divisional round. CJ Stroud now in the divisional round, his first 2 seasons in the NFL. What do you think is the biggest? I'm not saying that those teams tank to get to that position either. They're just bad football teams. What is your take on that? Do you think that's more of an anomaly than anything else, or do you think that might be something to monitor to see if that continues?
That's an interesting question. I think I have different answers for it. I thought Washington made a big improvement in their coaching this offseason while they also got Jaden Daniels. It wasn't just one thing, right? And they had a new general manager as well. So I feel like there's a lot new
Came
going
from San
on.
Fran.
Yeah. I think there's a lot new in Washington that's all working together, right? It's not just Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels had a great rookie season, but like he's not the only reason they're good. Like when you look at the numbers statistically, him and Caleb Williams are not that far off. But then you look at the results and it's dramatic because the Bears are a mess. And the Commanders had been a mess and are now not a mess. I thought that Stroud was just the better of the two. I just feel like the Panthers got it wrong. Like I don't really see a pattern there worth following. I'm not sure whether Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels is going to work out better. And by the way, I think Drake May is every bit as good as those two are as well.
Love Drake
even
May,
though he didn't have as productive of a season as they did. Yeah, I think the Panthers just picked the wrong guy. And I thought it was obvious at the time too. I don't really understand how everyone talked themselves into that one. That one still puzzles me. I think this one is just that the Commanders did the best job of those teams in resetting the rest of their squad around their quarterback.
Last thing I want to get to, because we are moving pretty long here, but the last thing I want to address was Mike Tomlin said even though they didn't win a playoff game, he thought they were better prepared to win a playoff game. And that was kind of the same mindset that you were in as well. You thought this would be the year that they ended their playoff drought. Did he expand upon why he felt that way at all? Was it simply just having a guy like Russell Wilson with the experience who's been there, done that, won a Super Bowl at the most important position, or kind of what played into that?
I just think this year's team had less obvious flaws than a year ago. The offensive line was better. The quarterback position was better. The offensive coordinator was better. Like all those things that you talked about and that sort of system of things that prevented the Steelers from being great outside of maybe wide receiver. All the rest of them were better this year than they were last year. And so like there was just less of that than there was a year ago. Like last year, you had a bunch of things that could not be successful under any circumstance, right? Like the last year's offensive line could not be successful under any circumstance. Last year's offensive coordinator could not be successful under any circumstance. Last year's collection of quarterbacks could not be successful under any circumstance. At least not any realistic one for the Steelers. This year, you got pieces that are better in all those areas. And I think, I think that gave good reason for optimism going into the playoffs. And I still, I still don't really understand what happened on defense against the Ravens, but Mike doesn't either. I don't think, like there's like coach speak, and then there's just him being honest about not knowing something. And you do this long enough and you get pretty good at telling the difference. I believe he genuinely does not understand why things on defense went the way they did against the Ravens right now. which is not heartening. But
yeah, absolutely. Oh, wait, actually, I said that was the last thing. No, this is the last thing. He said, save your time when asked about other teams potentially exploring a trade. He has a no trade clause anyway, so like it would have to be him motivated to move on. We both said that we didn't expect that to happen from the Steelers' point of view anyway. They don't want to trade him, but even if he wanted to, if they did, he had a no trade clause that could block that. So anything to add?
No, I mean, I think that we kind of knew that, but it's good to have him. You got to make him say it. That's what they say in our business. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, Alan, you know the drill. Tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok for now, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus. Got a story from Locker Room Cleanout Day there. Gonna have another one. Gonna try to get on the routine of doing that more often. Special stuff just for the subscribers. So now that we got the technology working on our side again, hopefully we can get that moving along.
There we go. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave us a 5-star review, and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, at least for the next 5 days. We'll see beyond that if somebody can finally purchase it or what's real, what's not. I have no clue what's going on. And then follow me.
I got like at least $100 cash. Should we just make a bid for TikTok?
I mean, I guess throw it out there. I don't know that's. They're going to laugh at it, I'm guessing. But, I mean, just it'd be cool to say that we tried. We attempted to purchase.
I'm going to submit a formal bid. I think it's worth at least $100.
There we go. Let us know your thoughts, comments, questions, all that good stuff in the comments of the show. And thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.